Hey there. Today we're going to be going into part 7 of our series called Homecoming. We call it Homecoming because Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is like his headquarters. That's like, he calls it his Father's house. Now, if you've been following us, you'll know that when he entered into Jerusalem, there's been opposition after opposition, and today is going to be just like that. We're going to be encountering another opposition that Jesus had to face. So let's get started. We're looking at chapter 20 of Luke, and we're starting from verse 20. Keeping a close watch on him, that's Jesus, they sent spies who pretended to be sincere. Now, the phrase right there, pretended to be sincere, is really hard to translate from the original language. The best way that I could describe it is imagine a person who comes to our church and he gets along with everybody and he's good at small talk and everybody likes him immediately. He's trying to win over your favorite. What he's really trying to do is he's going to betray somebody, but before he does that, he wants to gain everybody's favor. That's who this person is. So you could just imagine a guy named Joe walking into the midst of Jesus' followers, and he's looking around and saying, "Hey, is that a new haircut? Is that a new robe? I dig those new sandals." I mean, that's the kind of guy this person is. He's really good at buttering people up. He's good at flattery. He's trying to be one of them so that the betrayal will come at a big surprise. Now, the person who hired the secret agent is basically, for a lack of a better term, they would probably have used the words conservatives. Conservatives because these are the people who saw the Romans come invade their land, and they saw the corruption of the religious order at the time, and they found out a way how to make money off of it. And so when somebody comes in to change all that, they want to do their best to conserve the status quo at the time. They love their life so much, no matter how many people are suffering from it, they want to do everything they can to protect it. So let's keep reading. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. They realized at this point that the religious rulers, they really can't get Jesus. Jesus is way beyond their abilities. So they're saying, hey, let's get the Romans, let's get them to get Jesus. So the spies questioned him. "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth." I mean, again, they're doing what they're really good at. He's buttering up Jesus. Then, here's the big kicker. Here's the big surprise attack. "Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Now, this is a genius question, because it's one of those questions where whether if you answer yes or no, it's a I gotcha moment. See, if Jesus says yes to this question, yes, we should pay taxes to Caesar, his followers, his group of people who are part of this revolution, they're going to look at Jesus and say, "Jesus, we're following you because we thought you were anti-establishment. We thought we were following you because you are going against the Roman rule." Some might even murmur, "Jesus, you're just like the rest of them. You start with a great idea and a great revolution, but then when you get to the top, you become just like one of them." And so if Jesus answers yes to this question, he loses his revolution. But if he answers no, you shouldn't pay taxes to Caesar, it might please his followers, but then these spies, they could turn them into the Romans and have Jesus killed. You see, the people who hired these spies could go to the Romans and say, "Look, there's a rebel right there. He's going to start an uprising. You better stop him before the movement gets any bigger." So let's see how Jesus responds to this. It says in verse 23, he, Jesus, saw through their duplicity. Okay, and the word duplicity right there, in other translations, is the word craftiness. That's the same word that's used to describe the serpent in Genesis chapter 3. So Jesus saw the wickedness, but also craftiness and genius of the question, and said to them, "Show me a denarius," which is a form of currency, "whose image and inscription are on it." Now, I happen to have a replica of a denarius. If you look on it very carefully, there's a picture of Caesar right here. And also then on the back, it has an inscription back here, which I can't read, but I've been told it says that Caesar is Lord. Okay, now while the spy's question was genius, Jesus' response, which is also a question, is even more genius than that. And this is why. By Jesus asking them, "Show me a denarius," and they just happen to have one, shows that they were carrying Caesar's currency with them inside the temple, which was completely restricted back then. You don't want to bring the image of another person who claims to be God into the temple. So by them saying, "Sure, I got a denarius here. Yeah, that's Caesar's picture right there," they just revealed that they don't belong to the Jewish order, they actually belong to Caesar. Now, the very next thing that Jesus says is a thing that's even more genius than that. Verse 25. He said to them, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." You see, here Jesus is saying something that has two levels of meaning. The first level is closer to the surface level, but the second thing he says is very, very deep. So first, let me talk about the surface level thing. So he says, if you look at the coin, you'll see the image of Caesar on it. So give to Caesar what's his, because his image is on it. And so give to God what has his image on it. So the question is, what has God's image on it? Well, if you look at Genesis chapter 1, you'll find out that human beings were created in the image of God. And since every human being has an image of God imprinted in their souls, that means everybody belongs to God, and thus God unifies people. On the other hand, things like money, it actually divides people. There's the rich and there's the poor. There's the powerful and there's the weak. So again, on the surface level, what Jesus is saying here is God has the power to unify, whereas what you're trying to do is divide. So who are you going to follow? But if you are a student of the scriptures, which these people probably were, they would realize that there's an even deeper thing that Jesus is tapping into here. You see, like I said, in Genesis chapter 1, when God created humanity, he said that he took his image and then he created human beings by that image. So every human being has the image of God. But if you move on to the very next book, the book of Exodus, you'll find out that that image of God instead of human beings was at danger. You see, the people of God were enslaved in Egypt. And because of that, they lived according to the ways of Pharaoh. And the way of Pharaoh is basically whoever's strongest, whoever's in charge, tells you what life is really about. So as God, through Moses, pulled all these people out of slavery, out of Egypt into the desert, God said, I'm going to spend the next 40 years trying to reshape your heart just to remind you that you are not shaped by that culture, Egypt, but you are actually shaped by my image that's already inside of you. This is why in the middle of the desert, they're given the 10 commandments. The first commandment says you should have no other gods before me. That's his way of saying, if you prop up another god, you're going to start taking on the characteristics of that. If Pharaoh is your god, then you're going to live your life trying to be the most powerful person in the world because whoever's at the top gets the most benefits. Which leads us to commandment number 2. The second commandment says, do not create any images of me, of God. And God isn't saying that because, like, hey, every time you draw a picture of me, every time you make a sculpture of me, you always get the nose wrong or the ear looks kind of weird. He's not saying don't make an image of me because it never looks like me. No, if you look at it carefully, you'll discover that the reason why God says do not create images of me is because he already created an image of himself, and that's you, human beings. So that second commandment leads to the third commandment, which is do not misuse my name. What that means is now that you have me, God, inside of you, you know that you have my image wherever you go. Do not use my reputation in the wrong way. Do not use my name in vain. So as you can tell, God really, really cared about the fact that you have the image of God, and he really wanted to protect it. As a matter of fact, a few books later in the book of Deuteronomy, you'll come across chapter 6, which is one of the most famous chapters in the Old Testament. In there, you'll find this paragraph called the Shema, which is, if in Christianity, if the main verse is John 3:16, then the Jewish Bible, their main verse is Deuteronomy chapter 6. So this is how that goes. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. So that's the Shema. That's their theme verse. That's their life verse right there. But pay attention to what God says that they ought to do with that very verse. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates. Now, God's not telling them to tattoo the verse on their forehead and on their hands. What he's saying is, in everything you think and everything that you do, think about this verse. And as you go out to work, make sure you look at the verse before you leave that door, because there are so many different identities out there that they're trying to sway you to become. You see, to God, maintaining your identity, the image of God that's inside of you, is very, very important. And now we're going to skip all the way over to the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, chapter 13, there's a very, very famous story there. Even if you haven't read through the book of Revelation, you've probably heard of it. It's the mark of the beast, 666. It says that this beast is going to make you put on the mark of the beast on your forehead or on your hand. Now, I know there's been speculation as to what that mark of the beast is going to be, like a barcode or a microchip that they're going to implant in your forehead or on your hand. But that's not what the author meant to say by that in the book of Revelation. It's clearly a reference to Deuteronomy chapter 6. What they're saying is this: there's going to be a battle over your identity. Some of you are going to be thinking and doing things that goes right along with what the world thinks, and that world that's going to be dividing. You see, some of your identities are going to be so attached to the culture that's trying to form you, away from God's image that's inside of you, that you're going to start thinking and doing things according to what the culture wants you to do and think. Whereas the people of God are the people who push back on that and say, no, my identity is formed by the image of God that's inside of me. I am formed by love. So when Jesus says, give to Caesar what has his image on it, what he's really saying is, well, this coin is like a metaphor for you. Whose image is on you? If you've identified so much with the ways of Caesar, then when I say give to Caesar what is his, you actually end up going to Caesar. You become part of the problem. You become part of the divisiveness of this world. And then Jesus says, and when I say give to God what has his image on it, he's asking, so let me ask you, whose image is in you? God's or Caesar's? Now this is the ultimate mic drop moment, because look at the way that the spies respond. They were unable to trap him in what he said there in public. And astonished by his answer, they became silent. They had nothing to say back to him. I mean, how could you respond to Jesus at this point? I mean, what Jesus is saying is, these people around me, the image of God is in them. They want love in this world. But you, why are you so fixated on trying to gain as much as you can from this current system? Why can't you think of love before you think about power? And that's it. That's the end of that story. But for our sake, maybe we should try addressing the question that Jesus was asked, because it seems like Jesus didn't give a clear-cut answer. And the reason why Jesus didn't give that clear, simple, black and white answer is because it's not that simple. Here's a quote from a brilliant professor of the New Testament. Jesus' claim that we are to give to the emperor what is the emperor's and to God what is God's creates an insoluble problem, because they do not see how followers of Jesus can then live in the world as we know it. What he's saying here is that Jesus gave an answer that was neither yes or no. Instead, he brought up another problem. Let's keep reading. But to recognize that we have an insoluble problem is to begin to follow Jesus. Jesus' response does create an insoluble problem, but that is what it means to do. Now, here's the key. You know you have a problem, at least if you're a disciple of Jesus, when you do not have a problem. What he's saying here is, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, there is no clear-cut answers. I mean, there are verses in the Bible that says we shouldn't partake in the things of this world, but then there are verses in the Bible that also say that we need to plant our roots in the city and be a blessing to the community that we live in. There are verses in the Bible that says we should give away all we have, and there are other verses in the Bible that says that we should invest the things that we have in a very wise way. Now, to people who see things either black or white, you call these contradictions. But to the people of God, these are insoluble problems that we have to live with. Or even in this season politically, you say, there's some things on the right that I agree with, but there's a lot of things on the right that I disagree with. Or there's a lot of things I disagree with on the left, but there's even more things I agree with the left. Like, what are you supposed to do? You see, in this passage, what Jesus is doing is basically saying, I'm creating a tension in your life. If you have a clear-cut answer for all the things I just listed right now, clearly you bought into one ideology. But a person who's driven by love will always have that tension. Sometimes you'll agree with one proposition, and the very next day you might disagree with it because of love. What Jesus is saying here is, if you're very crystal clear about which side you land on every issue, then chances are your identity has been captured by that side. In other words, if your political party says, we believe in these things, these 10 things, and you blindly agree with them, chances are you're no longer driven by the image that's inside of you, which is love, which is Jesus, which is God, but you're rather driven by the political party that you're affiliating with. You belong to God, so do not let that image of God disappear inside of you. Give to Caesar what belongs to him, and give to God what has his image on it. And if everybody lives according to love, then it'll be a unifying agent. So church, may the image of God that's inside of you never be replaced by the image that the world is trying to impart on you. And may you be driven by the image of God that's inside of you, which is love. And may we all experience heaven together. God bless you.